You are a B2B service-based business owner and you are looking to gain more clients, create more impact and more revenue in your business. Tune in to Amplify Your Marketing Message with Christine Campbell-Rappin. Every week, we're going to take you through how to build an audience of buyers, mastering your marketing message, and making offers that convert consistently. We'll see you all on the inside. Welcome back to Amplify Your Marketing Message. I hope you've had a ton of fun being an audience member here in our community. And perhaps because you're seeing it so much fun, you're starting to think, I might have a podcast in my future. Well, this episode is going to be right up your alley. We're going to be talking with a phenomenal woman I've had the opportunity to collaborate with. She is a mentor and a host, and we're sitting down today to talk about tips for launching a successful podcast, because if it's not successful, why the heck are you doing it? Welcome to our show today. I want to introduce to you Donna, Eade. Welcome to our show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
I am too, because I've got so many clients that are watching my business going, I think I might do a podcast next year. And we want to talk about how do you lay the roadmap to success. So first I want to talk about from your perspective, because this is your business. You are both a host and you mentor people. Why should podcasting as a strategy to get in front of people be on your radar?
Oh, it's such a good strategy for getting on people's radar. It is growing exponentially. And the great thing about podcasting is that it is so new still. Like, it is one of those things that just is an untapped feature. And I feel like screaming it from the rooftops that everybody should have a podcast, because there are over 600 million blogs on this planet. So if you're thinking of starting a blog, you have got a heck of a lot of competition, and there are something like 52 million YouTube channels. So although video is where it's at on social media and all the video all the platforms are going over to video, it's still such a saturated market when it comes to trying to explode. Whereas podcasting is something that is being heard more and more. We're hearing people talk about it. It's in the media more, and people are celebrities have their own podcasts. So it's something that is growing. But when you look at who makes up the people who are actually doing podcasts, it's a very small number. So there are currently around 4 to 4.5 million podcasts, which already is ridiculously small number compared to those other areas, which means that you have such a potential to be one of the first in the door and growing something. And you always know that when you're the first in, you've got so much more opportunity to actually sort of bed in and make it a success. But the thing with podcasts is that the people, although there are 4.5 million there, oftentimes those people are not actually producing podcasts anymore. So I will probably come to the stats a bit later, but the stats for actually how many people are doing podcasts right now compared to the number that there are is vastly different. So it's just a market that is untapped, that people can really get their claws into and really make a difference in their business.
I love it. And I mean, I've been in the round of video for years. And I always tell people, what you see today is the evolution of it, not where it started. I started with interviews. I've done lives. I think I still have one of my very first live videos in the community that I run. And I show it saying, I just got tossed in and had to figure it out. Because it was the momentum, and you want to ride momentum where it's building. And that's what I'm hearing from you is it is still a relatively small market. It is a growing market. And what's really important, I read an interesting article yesterday, was talking about social media now just becoming media. And yet podcasting is bringing some of the social element on it. So whether you do a show like mine, which is a hybrid between interviews and solo episodes, it is about conversation and conversations with a very dialed in audience who chose to listen to you. So I want to talk about the fact that not only is it a small market, it is also a market where you're right. A lot of people start it and then abandon ship. The stats are high. 12 episodes is what most people don't even get past. I think I blinked and I was already at 20, and I think this will be close in and around episode 70, and I'm coming up my first full year of running the show. But let's talk about launching strong.
Mhm.
Why do you want to do this? Because this is something you have to think through, not just I want to do it, but why you want to do it. Let's talk about that.
Okay, so when it comes to launching your podcast, if you don't actually do a launch strategy, just like you would any other product in your business, you are going to fall short when you launch. And what that means is it's just going to be tougher to get that momentum going. And if it's tougher to get that momentum going, it's easy to get to episode 3 and go, oh, I don't want to do anymore, or episode 12 and go, this is too tough. This is not doing anything for me. You have got to launch like, like somebody in the 100-meter hurdles out of those little grips that they have, or, a horse out of its stables. You've got to get out there and really fly out of the gate to get that momentum. Otherwise, it's an uphill battle. I know, because I made that mistake. I thought, oh, I'll just start a podcast and I'll just put it out there, and, I'll just organically grow over time. And it was a struggle. And when I relaunched my podcast in April this year, I knew I needed to launch it properly. So I went back, I created a hype squad. We got together, we started talking about it. I showed them the graphics that I was thinking of. They got in on the conversation, they got involved, and I got my audience involved in that evolution of my podcast before I launched it. And it made such a huge difference in the podcast. So launching is so, so important.
It is, because it is like every product and service you have, which is you cannot, please hear me, buy into the Kevin Costner Field of Dreams business strategy. I'll build it, they will come, because they don't. If you don't have a strategic role for this podcast with strategic focused time where you're talking about what is my capacity long term to stay the course, this is a medium that does grow over time. But often one of the biggest missed expectations we all have in launches, whether it's a service, a program, or a podcast, we go, ta-da! And then we're like, where is everybody?
Yeah.
What's happening here? And the way you overcome that is really rethinking about your expectations. And I love that you said, I was winning with conversations and hype squads and movement and belief that this was not just my first time, but I'm coming at this a second time. And I have had multiple shows as well, and really thought about how the strategy is shifting, because your audience isn't necessarily from day one the right one and a buyer for you. And I want to talk a little bit about that, because we talk a lot on Amplify Your Marketing Message about the goal is building an audience of buyers. You talk about podcast as a way to connect to your audience. What should be our expectations with the launch, the first year? What does we need to really be thinking around so that we have a moment internally that says, I'm keeping on the strategy and staying the path. I'm going to build a mastery of a podcast host and a platform. Let's talk about that.
Okay. So for me, when it comes to whether I decided to carry on or not, and I'm a talker, so it was just a brilliant medium for me. So I really enjoy it. So it was never really an issue. I was always going to carry on doing it. But I think for a lot of people, they need that strategy behind it to start with. I didn't need that because I just enjoyed it. But for a lot of people, they do need it. And what you need to consider is, what is the outcome of the podcast? What do you want it to do for you? And I think if you just go in with it's just going to be my weekly content, and that's as far as you go with it, you're missing a trick. You need to really sit down and go, okay, what is the driving force behind the podcast? Where is it leading to? What is it that I want people to do when they're listening? So we talk about a call to action a lot. And I think that it is really important to know what your call to action for your podcast is. It is a great top of funnel item to have, but you need to have it in that strategy. And I know you talk a lot about strategy, Christine, and that funnel, and it is that top thing that can bring in so many people. And you're right, not everybody who listens to your podcast is going to be somebody who buys from you or is going to buy from you in the next short while. It may be that they've listened to your podcast for years. I was an avid Amy Porterfield listener from sort of 2014, and I didn't buy from her until about 2018, 18, something like that. So I'd listened to her for 4 years before I ever bought. So podcasting is a long-term marketing strategy. And I think that's where a lot of people make mistakes, is they think that, oh, I'm just going to put a podcast out and I'm going to get loads of clients in. It doesn't work like that. You've got to think bigger picture with a podcast. Now, you can definitely put things out there and market around it to boost it and get sales in a quicker time. However, it is a long-term marketing plan. And I think a lot of people miss that step, which is why they give up before they get to episode 21.
I so love this. Two really important things from our audience building strategy that I heard you say. This is top of funnel. Okay, this isn't the offer. This isn't the bottom of the funnel. And I think sometimes we miss that. We miss that as guests who are looking to get on other people's platforms. And we miss it if we're going to launch a platform. This is about nurturing the know, like, and trust factor, the very, very top of the funnel. And that's why you need to show up with value, with invitations to movement, to, if you want to help your audience shift themselves into the buyer group, which then you certainly can make the offers and bring lead magnets. But this is important. This is also a long-term strategy. One thing I tell people, if you're going to launch a podcast, I tell this to my clients, what's the conversation you want to have now that you know will still be valuable in 5 years? Because to your point, you followed a person who had a platform for years before you ever moved yourself down to the bottom of the funnel and became a buyer. And this is sometimes the challenge, is that I know I want to be helping clients figure out how to build a client growth engine. That is everything to me. And I know it's not going to be anything that's not going to be topical in this calendar year or 5 years from now. Our tactics might change, but the need does not. Because in the world of podcasting, they don't necessarily follow you from day one. And they might land into episode 327. And then they might binge watch. So let's talk about some of the surprising facts that make podcasting something that should be on your radar, but we're going to say launch it strong. Be seeing this as a long-term top of funnel strategy, because you're missing out riding a huge wave of momentum.
Absolutely. So the first one was what I was alluding to earlier, which kind of goes on to what we were talking about earlier, which is that I have a top 1% podcast. And Christine, I don't know if you realize this, but so do you. So 90% of people who start a podcast don't make it past episode 3. And when I work with clients, I tell them to launch with 3 episodes to start out of the gate. We're talking about launching strong, 3 episodes up, so that people can do that binge listen and really understand who you are and what you're teaching, so they can fall in love with you and they can go, do you know what? I cannot wait for next week, rather than giving them 1 episode and then really forget about you because it was only 1 episode and they didn't really get that pull to sort of listen in more. So I say launch with 3 episodes. So 90% of people don't get past that. And then 90% of people in that 10% that don't get past episode 21, which means that if you've got an episode 22, you have a top 1% podcast. And that's bonkers to me. But it means that if you can put that long-term strategy in place and say, do you know, I'm in this for the long haul, and I know that this is going to bring me in clients down the road, and I've got a strategy in place for that, then you can soar past episode 21 and you can make that commitment. So I think that's a great thing to remember, is that, 4.5 million podcasts out there, yes, but a lot of them are just stagnant. People, it's just like YouTube channels, they don't get deleted, unless somebody deletes, unless the host deletes it themselves. So they're just sitting there. And how annoying would it be to go to a podcast, fall in love with those first 3 episodes, and then realize that they did that 3 years ago and there's nothing else. That would be so painful as a listener. So, make that commitment. If you're going to do a podcast, make it a commitment. Make a commitment to yourself and to your audience, because you do them a disservice if you stop. So that's one point there. The other is that 80% of people who press play on a podcast will listen to the entire episode. And that is so fantastic for us as business owners, because on YouTube, if you've got a 50 to 60% retention rate on a video, that's seen as good. 80% of people listening to the entire episode is phenomenal. And that means that when you've got to the end of your episode and you've got your call to action, most people are hearing that call to action. So you're not necessarily having to shove in ads here and there and like trying to get in that call to action early. You can leave it to the end. You don't have to. And I would say definitely mention it before the end of your episode, because people who are able to go and access their computer at that time can be accessing it at the same time as listening to you. But majority of people, 22%, listen when they're in their cars, which means that they're putting it on. I have a trip once a month that I go on, which is 2 hours away from me. I queue up podcasts for about an hour's worth of time and I listen on my way. I can't stop. I can't do anything, but I am listening to the entire thing. And you better believe that if you're saying something that's caught my attention, I'm remembering that. And when I get to my destination, I'm like, oh, let me just look up. And I'm finding that information. So that's a really important fact to know as well, is that most people who actually press play on a podcast are going to continue to listen. So there are lots of other different facts, but one of the things that has come up in the media recently is that podcast hosts are actually now more influential than influencers. If you can believe that.
So true. I will tell you, I haven't heard the stat, but I 100% agree with that, because you have the right people listening to you and your credibility is sustained through your longevity strategy.
Absolutely. So the stats, something like 75% of people who listen to a podcast will buy what the podcast host is selling, whether that's recommending a product, whether it's selling something, whether it's a freebie, they will convert. 75%. That is insane. So this isn't 75% from the first time they listen, though. And that's what I want to reiterate again, is the longevity of it. 4 years before I converted for Amy. So, you've got to remember that. But 75% of people will buy from a person who has a podcast that they're listening to, over celebrities, over influencers, over TV and film. And I thought that was a fantastic stat. So those alone, I think, are great reasons to get on the podcast train.
I absolutely love those stats. And for all those people in the audience, and I get lots of questions saying, could you pull some stats for us? And the thing that when I looked at podcasting, I have done several, as I said. I have this show, Amplify Your Marketing Message. It's my passion, because it is about where my heart comes from, which is I want more of you to succeed, because boy, you're making it hard and it's painful watching. I've also been a host for a top-rated show for somebody else's platform, which was really about networking and meeting people. And when we talk about this, I've heard so many great nuggets, which is the audience is highly educated, often affluent, focused on solutions. And if you're particularly in the B2B space, which of course our audience will be primarily, they are looking for solutions. And it isn't just about that short-term sale. And I know when I built this strategy, I want to just pull back the curtain. I think the audience would find this interesting, and you might as well. This was never about client growth for me. Most people go, I want to do a podcast because I want clients and I want them yesterday. We've debunked that and said top of funnel, not bottom. But I never brought this around for client growth. It doesn't mean that I haven't had people come to me saying, well, where did you hear from me? I've been binging your podcast. And it always tickles me to hear that, but that's not the goal line. My goal line is, what is my result, which is client conversion. And I thought, when people have the foundations in place, which is the work I do, they need amplification. So I strategically built this podcast to have experts like Donna and others who you've seen on this platform come into my space, because when you need them, hire her. I've already vetted her. I already have collaborated with her. I already know she is a good person, so that when you're ready to add in the tech accelerators, I'm going to say, don't go to the world of Facebook. Don't go to the world of that fake Instagram influencer. I'm going to say, go to people who were walking their talk, because it will be the fastest path to acceleration, which is what I'm all about. And because of that, when people come into my platform, I said, it's one, it raises your elevation in your peer group. it's a great way to start to build a collaboration relationship because you said, I have access to something that's valuable. And this isn't the first conversation we've had. Donna and I have now played together a couple of times, and I will continue to introduce my network to her. And I say to people, that is strategic. And when I say to my clients, the interesting thing about my clients, I help my clients get more results by the people I bring into my podcast. And the interesting thing, all my clients know, which is why they all want now podcasts. Christine, I need to go meet them. Could you introduce me? Yes. I've had guests come to me and say, I actually need to meet that guest. Can you introduce me? Yes. All of that is value creation, which has a very long tail. And it helps establish you as the must hire, which is ultimately going to have the biggest crescendo for the long term. So I want to ask you, I ask all of my guests this. You are seeing success in your business. You've had a course correction. You've relaunched something. You've done it with a really intentional strategy. But what's the most effective thing you're doing right now to amplify your marketing message and bring client growth to your business?
Well, of course, I'm going to say my podcast is the method that I use for amplifying. But aside from the podcast, because I don't want to just sort of harp on about my podcast without saying anything else, is that networking for me is like the biggest thing. The number of people that I can connect with in a networking situation, whether that's free networking or paid networking, I find it invaluable. Just the art of connecting with people on a one-to-one basis. And I know we're all talking about amplifying and sort of going out there one-to-many and all of that that's out there, but there is something so special about connecting with people on one-to-one basis. And whether you're looking to have a 6, 7, 8-figure business, or whether you're just looking at, this is what I need for my family to get by, and I'm happy with that because it gives me the lifestyle that I want, whatever your figure is, I think relationships are key to making that happen. And the way you build relationships is having that one-to-one interaction. And that's why I love my podcast, because it's not just about me amplifying through talking to my audience, but it's about the connections with the guests. It's about building relationships with them. It's about my listeners who message me. When I get emails from my listeners, that makes my day. It is the happiest I feel. And these people become friends. And then it's like, it's not business. It's helping each other out, and I love that. So that's kind of where I'm at with it, is networking is really powerful for me.
I love that, because this is never going to be a one size fits all. Networking and I would say the antithesis of this group conversation is actually pulling the one-to-ones that really create amazing ripples. Donna, how do people find you and connect with you, learn more about your programs and services?
So you can find me at donnaeade.com. That's EADE. And I'm there. I've got a masterclass on there. All of my information is on there. And then I'm on Instagram, Donna_Eade_, and that's where I like to hang out most.
Guys, go connect with her. She's got some great resources. She's got some great behind the scene tips to help you have an effective strategy with your podcasting. Until next time, thank you for being our guest. Connect and launch successfully a podcast. Start building your long strategy. We'll see you on our next episode. That's a wrap on another amazing episode of Amplify Your Marketing Message with me, your host, Christine Campbell-Rappin. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss another great episode. And be sure to visit christinecampbellrappin.com/podcast to get a free resource on how to master your marketing message. We'll see you all on our next episode.